Thank you for watching Outnumbered Overtime. Join me with David Asman at 4 p.m. Eastern on Fox Business. I'm Melissa Francis. Ed Henry is in today for Dana on the Daily Briefing, which starts right now.
And this is a Fox News alert. Republican Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn, they're expected to hold a press conference any moment now after touring an immigrant housing facility in South Texas. Hello, everyone. As you heard, I'm Ed Henry, in for Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Also on tap, we're going live to the White House, where President Trump will speak after meeting with the families of U.S. citizens whose loved ones were victims of violent crime at the hands of illegal immigrants. That emotional gathering coming on the heels of the president taking executive action to deal with the crisis at the southern border. Steve Harrigan is live in West Loco, Texas. Steve, sounds like some VIPs will be there shortly to get a handle on what's really happening there on the ground.
That's exactly right, Ed. A big media crowd here awaiting the two Texas senators, Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. They toured a detention center earlier today, doing what many politicians across the country on both sides of the aisle are doing, trying to get a firsthand look at exactly what is going on with this problem, which has really gotten the nation's full attention. So we expect them here in a few minutes to make their remarks. And their visit here to the Rio Grande Valley comes on the heels of a visit by the First Lady, Melania Trump, here yesterday. She went to a shelter for 50-plus children, some of those children crossing the border and apprehended on their own, others forcibly separated from their parents. She offered help in any way she could to try to reunite those children with their parents, Ed.
All right, and Steve, what is the progress right now in terms of reuniting separated children with their parents? That was one of the goals of this executive order. Where are we on that?
That's really been the key issue. Administration officials saying that already 500 of an estimated 2,300 separated children have already been reunited, but we're seeing more movement on behalf of nonprofit organizations as well as law firms. The government also intending to try to set up a regional center here to help those reunification efforts, which until now have really been plagued by problems in the bureaucracy. We did see one hopeful sign last night, a reunification at 2:30 in the morning at a Baltimore airport. A woman from Guatemala was separated from her 7-year-old son 1 month ago, reunited just before her lawsuit went into effect, suing the U.S. government for forcible separation. Ed, back to you.
All right, Steve, appreciate it. We'll get back to you and the senators if they go to that press conference live in just a few moments. Thank you, Steve. Meanwhile, President Trump calling for a GOP timeout of sorts on immigration reform until after the midterm elections. This coming after House Republicans rejected a conservative bill and delayed a vote on a so-called compromise measure until next week. The president tweeting Republicans should stop wasting their time on immigration until after we elect more senators and congressmen and women in November. Dems are just playing games, have no intention of doing anything to solve this decades-old problem. We can pass great legislation after the red wave. Joining me now, Chris Stirewalt. He's, of course, the Fox News politics editor and the editor of Halftime Report. Good to see you, sir.
Howdy, man.
Now, the flip side to that, of course, Mr. President, is if you don't elect more Republicans in the House and Senate, January 2019, you're going to have an even harder time, it seems, to pass immigration reform.
Well, is it any wonder people hate this town? Is it any wonder that Americans despair of Washington and the ability of our leaders here to get things done? Can you imagine anything more naked, more brazen than you say, we were going to try to pass something, but let's just wait till after the election. We'll use it as an issue in this election. We'll wait till after the election, and then we promise we'll get it done. It sounds an awful lot like what Republicans did with Obamacare, right, only to come back in after, okay, we finally ran the table. We got everything we wanted. Okay, pass it. No, we can't. And the truth on this one is much the same as it was on Obamacare and remains on Obamacare. The division among Republicans is more consequential at the outset. Yes, the Republicans and Democrats are miles apart on this issue, but unless and until the Republicans can come to agreement amongst themselves, pass something out of the House, and get the bulk, the overwhelming majority of the Republican conference in the Senate, none of this stuff matters.
Well, Chris, the president's talking that tweet about a so-called red wave to counter the blue wave, of course. But if you think back, Barack Obama elected and it comes to power in 2009, promised to get immigration reform done by his first year in office. He had Democrats in the House. He had power, across the board. This president has Republicans with a clear majority in the House. It's obviously more complicated in the Senate. He doesn't have 60 votes there. But don't Republicans risk sort of deflating their base heading into the midterms, as you say, if you compare it to frustration over Obamacare? If you have conservative voters saying you can't get this stuff passed, it seems like it's going to be a pickle.
Well, that's right. No matter what. So, look, it is possible that the Republicans, even in what is going to be a tough year for Republicans might expand their majority in the Senate. It's possible. It's going to be some rough sledding, but they can get there. It can be easier in the Senate than it is right now. But no one, not even Republican strategists, would expect that their majority will be anything but smaller in the House. The best case scenario for Republicans is that they survive, keep the majority, but with fewer than their current 23-seat margin. So you tell me, is it going to be easier or harder to pass legislation on immigration with a smaller Republican majority in the House if they can't do it now?
And Chris, we got some big primaries, as you know, coming up Tuesday. Before we get to that, there's this Pew poll out. And you remember, traditionally, it's been, well, I hate Congress, but I like my congressman or congresswoman. These polls say, wait a second, this month, 73% when asked, who controls Congress? Is that a factor in your vote? 73% of Democrats this month say yes, it is. Republicans, 70% say yes, it is. Back in 2014, it was only 62% for each party, meaning who's going to be in power after all of this matters. It's not just whether or not you like the man or woman who's representing your district. How does that play out? On impeachment, we know the president wants people talking about that because it might motivate Republican voters to say, you got to keep Republicans in power or he might be impeached. How does it play out on immigration?
On immigration, like everything else, it becomes a national issue. So long ago, in those halcyon days, Tip O'Neill said all politics are local. Well, that is not the case and hasn't been for quite a while now. When we see this intensifying attention to the midterm elections, once upon a time, midterm elections were not considered that big of a deal, but everything's at an 11 now. And the intense focus that you see in that poll for these midterm elections and whether will the Republicans keep control of the House, will the Democrats be in control of the House, the fact that that is superseding to such a great degree who my representative is. It's not who my representative is anymore. It's which party wins this election. That tells us something about the changing nature of American politics and the fact that not all politics are local. In fact, all politics are national now.
So what's on your radar for Tuesday? I know we've got New York, I believe Maryland, Utah, Colorado. Are there any races, either in the House or Senate, next week that primary battles that are on your radar and our viewers should be paying attention to?
A couple things I would watch. Number one, Staten Island. As would befit one of the roughest, toughest districts in the country. Out on Staten Island, you have a remarkable race where the president has endorsed the incumbent Donovan, but you have Grimm, who had to leave office after pleading guilty to a felony and being a very rough and tumble character. He's trying to take his seat back, and that one is Donnybrook. And the other one I'm going to watch in South Carolina, Henry McMaster should win. He's serving as governor. He has the president's backing. He also has a visit from the president upcoming in South Carolina. How decisive is that win? That'll tell us a lot about how deep Trump's control in South Carolina is, because never forget, that's an early primary state, and that will be an important firewall for him potentially in 2020.
Absolutely, and may that be why Vice President Pence, as I understand, I believe he's going to be in South Carolina this weekend. Talk about his role in these midterms as well.
Well, he is doing the traditional role of vice presidents, which is to rally the base. But in this case, he and the president take that in two slightly different pieces. The president's job is to go to places like he did in Minnesota, where you have people who are maybe traditional Democrats, but who are Trump voters before they're Republicans. Pence's job is to go talk to traditional Republicans, suburbanites, the usual Republican coalition, and say, look, we're getting the things done that you want. Even if you have some discomfort with the way the president does them, we are achieving the policy aims that you want, and this is a conservative administration.
All right, Chris Stirewalt, appreciate your insight today. Have a good weekend.
You bet.
American military pilots reportedly targeted by lasers over the Pacific, and U.S. officials say they've got an idea of who's behind it. Plus, the life and legacy of Charles Krauthammer. We'll hear from Dana Perino next on her friendship with the man who always spoke his mind.
It's my job to call a folly a folly. You're betraying your whole life if you don't say what you think, and you don't say it honestly and bluntly. The biggest error that we make is to lose the damn war because we refuse to recognize who the enemy is and what it requires. For God's sake, why do you have to talk about that? The mourning is over. The Shiva is done. And if you're a conservative, you should be optimistic. I think it'll snow in hell before the DOJ is going to go after her. We all were expecting it. It didn't happen. That was the dog that didn't bark.
Clearly, he did not mince words, and we are mourning the loss today of our dear friend and colleague, Charles Krauthammer. The Pulitzer Prize winner died from cancer yesterday at the age of 68. The legacy he leaves behind, immeasurable. Former President George W. Bush writing in a statement, quote, "For decades, Charles' words have strengthened our democracy. His work was far-reaching and influential, and while his voice will be deeply missed, his ideas and values will always be a part of our country." Indeed. Joining us now by phone, host of the Daily Briefing, co-host of The Five, Dana Perino, my colleague and friend. Dana, welcome, and I wonder what your thoughts are now that we've had a little bit of time to digest this monumental loss.
Well, it's amazing to me. I guess I probably should have known that the outpouring would be as big as it is. And I had that instinct years ago when I came up with the idea of him doing a collection of his columns, partly because I'd spent almost all of my career reading them and learning from him. But I really am also, aside from the intellectual prowess that he had and the just ability to clearly argue his case and to do it with grace and decency and integrity, is how many personal connections he made with people. A couple of things I didn't know was how he took time to reach out to people like veterans from coming back from the Iraq and Afghan wars who had been debilitated, injured in some way, disabled, and he would reach out to them and explain to them how he approached his life after his accident at age 22 and to try to give them some comfort. And he just really seemed to almost be 25 people in one because he got so much done and touched so many hearts.
He certainly did, and I know that something in that book that you mentioned, Things That Matter, there was a particular column that resonated with you where he wrote, "The question of whether America is in decline cannot be answered yes or no. There is no yes or no. Both answers are wrong. For America today, decline is not a condition. Decline is a choice. 2 decades into the unipolar world that came about with the fall of the Soviet Union, America is in the position of deciding whether to abdicate or retain its dominance." And it seems like those words more powerful now than ever.
I loved that column. It basically defined where we are going to go from here. And in those 4 words, decline is a choice, that simple sentence basically crystallized what was in front of us. And that decline is certainly not something that we want as a country. And what he then goes on to say is that it is in our hands. And the other thing I would say is that column informed me when I wrote, and the good news is, I have a chapter in there about civility, lost and found. And one of the things I wrote is that civility is a choice. And I really think that I got that from that construct, and that how you conduct yourself as we go about talking about politics, opining, having the debates that we're having, how can we conduct ourselves in a way that is persuasive, but also not vitriolic? Because
Yes.
Charles certainly could win almost every argument that he ever made, but he never did it in anger. He was never mean. He was just always so kind, and I really feel the loss, Ed. I really do.
I can hear it in your voice, and I'm glad that last point you made, because you talk about essentially class and dignity. Washington is a town with a lot of important people, a lot of people also who think they're important. You worked in the White House, and you can understand the idea of getting a big head and trying to stay humble. And I mentioned earlier today on the air that Jody Curtis is one of our fabulous producers in Washington. Our viewers haven't heard of her because she works behind the scenes and makes the rest of us look good with her hard work. We have, hundreds of producers like that. I mentioned her because she was on Facebook today talking about how she was kind of nervous at first to debate the great Charles Krauthammer, this Pulitzer Prize winner, and yet he treated her, because they both like baseball, he treated her with great respect. And every day when he came in, he had to sort of move his wheelchair past her desk to get to Bret Baier's studio. And they both loved the Washington Nationals, and they would talk about who's in the lineup tonight every day like clockwork at 4:30 before the 7 7 p.m. game and before Brett's show. And I make that point because Jody, I think, made the point in her post that resonated with a lot of our colleagues that it didn't matter whether you were the president, President Bush talking about his legacy, or you were a producer at Fox, or you were somebody, down at the security desk. He treated everybody with that kind of dignity and respect.
And he was so curious and interested in everybody. Plus, he, as you know, he was a clinical psychiatrist, but he said he was in remission. But when he had a moment with you, he could ask you the most penetrating questions that would get to the nub of what was going on in your life. And whether it was mentoring advice, career advice, relationship advice, or, helping somebody like me when my dog Henry died. I remember he took some time to say to me, we do this because dogs make us better, even though we know they're not going to live as long as we do.
Well,
he was just really wonderful, Ed, and it was a privilege of a lifetime to even get a chance to read his columns, but to know that he loved and respected us back is immeasurable.
Well, we are certainly better for his legacy, his writings, his friendship, and we're better today for your insights and memories because they're warm and they're really helping all of us get through a very difficult time here at Fox and all the people that Charles touched. Dana, I appreciate you on a day off taking some time out to reach out. I know the audience wanted to hear from you.
I have to say, Ed, I don't think there would be a daily briefing show without the guidance of Charles Krauthammer. I learned so much from him. And thank you for filling in today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Dana, and we appreciate your insights today. We look forward to you back on Monday. Meantime, tune in to the 1 hour special tonight. Charles Krauthammer, his words, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fox News Channel. Meanwhile, a lot of other big news today. The USS Gerald Ford may be the most technologically advanced aircraft carrier in the world. But are the Chinese working on one that's going to match it? Plus, the president breaking with his defense secretary to call for the military to create a space force. Up next, General Jack Keane has some details live. A Pennsylvania district attorney now saying a black teenager shot and killed by an East Pittsburgh police officer had an empty gun clip in his pocket. The death of 17-year-old Antoine Rose II sparking protests throughout the city. Rose was riding in a car that police pulled over for possible involvement in an earlier shooting. The teenager was shot while running from police. According to the mayor there, the officer who shot Rose had been sworn in just hours before the incident, but had 8 years of experience at another police department. Meanwhile, new reports that commercial-grade lasers have targeted U.S. military pilots more than 20 times in recent months. U.S. officials saying they believe the Chinese are behind the incidents, all of which have been in the area of, yes, the East China Sea. Joined now by Fox News senior strategic analyst Jack Keane, a retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So what do you think about China being behind this?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. China has been running a campaign for 5 to 6 years in the East China Sea, Western Pacific writ large, designed to, one, drive down the loyalty of our allies, and two, to drive us out of the region. China clearly wants to dominate the Western Pacific. They resent the fact that since World War II, the United States has sort of commanded the Pacific. All the allies in the Pacific belong to the United States, not to China. China's got one ally in the region, North Korea.
And given the North Korea talks then, what do we make of this when we think China may be helpful to the North Korea peace talks, and yet they're involved in this, they're involved in the incident where we believe our U.S. diplomats in China have been targeted. What are they really up to?
Yeah, well, strategically, as I indicated, they want to dominate the Indo-Pacific region. They're using economic warfare, economic aggression, and militarization to achieve those ends. Strategically, they even have bigger ambitions than that. President Xi is on record for saying this: the United States is a declining power, China is a rising power. Somewhere beyond 2030, China will replace the United States as the preeminent global power in the world. That is where they're heading. And they're building a navy to help them do that and increasing the capacity for their armed forces, et cetera, in general.
So how does the economic warfare, if you will, that President Trump seems to be trying to wage with tariffs and pushing back on the idea that China is going to dominate the U.S., how does that play in?
Yeah, it definitely plays in, and this is the first president that's sort of taken them on. You know, the thing we've been wrong for 2 decades now about China. We believe that under Deng Xiaoping, when he started to build the economy and move to a market society, we encouraged that, we participated in it, but the thought would be the more they got involved in capitalism, eventually political reform would follow. Wrong answer. Now we know they're actually clamping down. And
president for life.
Yeah, there's more repression and there's more control, to be sure, and they're much further away than what we thought would be some possibility of a democracy following on the heels of capitalism, like South Korea.
Shifting gears, the president's been talking, he had this rally in Minnesota where he's talking a lot about domestic issues, the economy and immigration, and then he threw out what seemed like a throwaway line about this Space Force that he's been talking about. And I was watching the rally that night, and people in the crowd started chanting, Space Force, Space Force. This is a big, that the people are demanding, but the Wall Street Journal just broke a story a few hours ago saying that Defense Secretary Mattis and others at the Pentagon are very wary of this.
Well, what's the issue? The reason why people are wanting the Space Force, there's a good reason behind it, is that space is not getting the emphasis that it should when the services are putting together their budgets. It sort of takes a back seat. And what's happening? I can tell you this, can't get into the numbers because that's classified, but in general, by 2030, China will have 3 times as many satellites in space than the United States had. That is an absolute flip from where we used to dominate space. So those who are pushing Space Force recognize the fact that the United States is losing its dominance in space. We've got the resources to make that happen, but the decisions in support of space are not happening to the degree that many think they should have.
So would one of the concerns, because it seems like the Air Force is concerned about their turf and who's doing what, how would the Space Force compare to the current U.S. Air Force, obviously?
Well, what they think is they would build a Space Force that would still have the Air Force Secretary overseeing it with his or her staff, much as the United States Navy Secretary oversees the United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy. That's the thought behind it. Listen, Ed, my own gut about this, we got to take a look at it. Every time we throw an organizational change at something, particularly big bureaucracies like we have in the Pentagon, it doesn't mean you're getting a better answer.
And you're talking about a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, because it's going to have huge overhead. So we got to take a look at it. I think the department is capable of taking a hard look at this thing and give the president some straight answers.
General Keane.
It's always good seeing you.
Great seeing you, sir. President Trump, meanwhile, set to speak live on immigration right at the White House any moment now. We'll bring that to you when it starts. Plus. Breaking in the last few moments, protesters trying to shout down Senator Marco Rubio after he got a look inside one of those facilities where the government is housing immigrant children separated from their parents. We'll have a live report from Florida next. Welcome back, and we are awaiting President Trump. He's set to speak shortly on immigration. The president meeting with so-called angel families who have had a family member hurt or killed by an illegal immigrant. We understand there are some family members in that audience who have photos of their relatives who have perished, and this is a very emotional issue. This coming as the Department of Health and Human Services is allowing a first look inside one of the facilities housing children separated from their parents. Our own Phil Keating was on that tour. He joins us now live from the facility in Homestead, Florida. Good to see you, Phil. What did you get to see? We've heard so much accusations, allegations. You're actually bringing some facts to the table.
And that's why we went in there, Ed. This was a direct response to a week's worth of heavy criticism by elected politicians as well as the media to have our own opportunity to go inside and not just receive handout video. Well, the vast majority of the kids inside today, about 1,200 of them, they're all teenagers, boys and girls, ages 13 to 17. And the vast majority of these kids came into the country illegally by themselves, without their parents. About 70 of the kids, according to the shelter, are recent arrivals who came in with their moms and dads, and now they're separated from them while their parents are in other detention facilities. Now, Health and Human Services provided a group of about 20 media representatives a 1-hour tour inside. We saw part of the highly structured daily life of these illegal immigrant teens playing soccer and basketball. We were not allowed to bring cameras inside, nor were we allowed to talk to the kids. Those were the rules. According to the Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement, which oversees this facility, these 1,200 teenagers come primarily from El Salvador and Honduras, much like the situation along the Texas border, and all crossed into the country from Texas, Arizona, or California. 2 nights ago, HHS released this handout video of what it's like inside, and from what we saw, this is pretty much what we saw. That's how it was. Clean classrooms where the kids have 6 hours of academics each day. We saw the cafeteria where breakfast was still out, scrambled eggs, fruit, hash browns, a biscuit, very much one of 3 square meals a day they get. Segregated dormitories for the boys and girls. Each room in the dorms has 6 sets of bunk beds, so 12 kids to each room. HHS tells us the goal here is to provide a safe and secure temporary environment while they try to locate a place, family first and foremost, to put these kids before they enter immigration proceedings. Moments ago, Senator Marco Rubio, who did get inside today, unlike Senator Nelson on Tuesday, he just told us he does support keeping the families that cross the border illegally together, but he says to do so because of the numbers is going to require more capacity and money.
It was my perception that we have a place that's operating under very challenging circumstances and trying to do the best they can from the brief time that we were there. And obviously we need to ensure that irrespective of how someone came here or what legal status they're under, we're the United States of America, and we should have the highest standards possible in terms of how we're treating people. All right. And then on the brevemente en español, I'll wait for them to finish.
As you could hear there were a handful of hecklers heckling Senator Rubio and interrupting him, demanding all of these children no longer be separated. Like I said, the senator says he does support keeping them together, but he is skeptical that right now, due to the numbers crossing in, that we can do that. Right back to you, Ed.
All right, Phil Keating, live in Florida. We appreciate you actually bringing us inside and what's actually happening there. As we wait the president's remarks on immigration, I'm joined now by A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist at Real Clear Politics. Good to see you, A.B.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Well, you know, I wonder, there's sort of mixed signals from the president today when he's been demanding that Congress do something on immigration. Then he tweets out today, never mind, wait until after the midterms. So we could talk about the frustration that lawmakers may have with that. But what about the frustration of the president with the fact that Congress can't get off the dime? He's got Republicans running the House. The Senate, it's obviously more complicated. He doesn't have 60 votes. But A.B., he's been pushing and pushing. Barack Obama was pushing even before that, and they're not getting anything done.
Right. Look, the truth is he can tweet about how much Republicans need to elect more members so they can have more votes. But they have the votes. They're in the majority, right, Ed? They can pass a Republican bill without one Democrat. Yeah. The division is within their own ranks. The people who are running in districts like Jeff Denham in California, that Hillary Clinton won, or districts where Donald Trump only won by 2 and maybe his approval numbers are abysmal right now. Those are the seats full of swing voters that the Republicans need to hold their majority. And those are the districts in which the Freedom Caucus bill or the Goodlatte bill, those kinds of immigration reforms don't fly. Deep cuts into legal immigration, on and on. So there's got to be something that they could do that addresses Dreamers or separating kids from families or some visa reforms that would definitely pass the House and likely pass the Senate, but it's not what the president wants. And so you have these divisions within the Republican Party that are really going to affect turnout in the midterm elections. It's really a calculation. I was interested in your discussion with Chris about, you know, what if voters just say all you ever did was the tax bill and you can't get anything done and you're not a functioning governing majority.
You're right. But meanwhile, you're right. The president campaigned and won on the idea he's going to crack down on illegal immigration. He is doing stuff on an executive basis. But you're right. They're going to be real quick. They're going to be people saying, wait a second, Republicans in Congress, you have power and you didn't pass anything.
That's the problem, Ed. It's Republicans who are running for re-election. Trump is not on the ballot. And when he goes into a meeting and says, I have your back 1,000%. You guys just have to pass something. Let's do this. And then 2 days later says it's a waste of your time. Don't do it. Yeah. It doesn't actually help them get voters into the car on November 6th to defend their majority. Trump voters love Trump. It's going to be a question of whether or not they turn out for Republicans. That's a big question for them.
Absolutely. And we see a little bit of movement there at the White House, as if maybe the president will be out in a moment or two. So I want to apologize in advance that we're going to go there live. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a question or two about the life and legacy of Charles Charles Krauthammer. You wrote a beautiful piece. I recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it yet. There's a lot of wonderful tributes, but yours is really at the top. The Unconfined Life of Charles Krauthammer. And it's based on a conversation you had with him about what he thinks life is all about.
Yeah, Charles told me once many years ago that he believes that life is an accident and we have to adjust to whatever the twists and turns are, good and bad. And that is really a statement coming from someone who suffered paralysis and became a quadriplegic at age 22, but was so determined to finish medical school. He did so in the hospital in traction, lying on his back with his studies projected on a screen above, graduated near the top of his class on time, and basically told Bret Baier in the special that I urge everyone, there'll be one tonight, but the one I referenced in my column was from 2013. It was an hour of Bret interviewing Charles, all about his life. His story is an amazing story of a human life, Ed, as you know.
Absolutely.
So it's not only his great written work and his great commentary, but I want everyone to learn about Charles the human, and
Absolutely.
it was a story for all of us.
A.B., thanks for sharing those remembrances. It's 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. Don't miss it. You can hear the clapping, the applause. The president is there. He's greeting these, they're called angel families because they've had relatives who have either been injured or killed by illegal immigrants. This is something the president has highlighted before, but it also is something obviously he's going to continue to highlight because it plays right in to what he wants to talk about, which is cracking down on illegal immigration. Here's the president.
Some time together, so I didn't mind giving you a second hello. Not at all. We've known each other a long time. We've been friends for a long time, from the beginning of the campaign. And these are special people. Please sit down. Vice President Pence, thank you very much for joining us, Mike. I also want to recognize Acting Director Homan, who's leaving us. He's been truly a star, and he's leaving. He's retiring. But where is Tom? Is he around here someplace? Tom, stand up, Tom. Great guy. Tom has been doing what he's doing for 34 years and doing it with strength and dedication, and you are really outstanding. And you're highly recommended. Replacement is going to do a great job. We know him well. He's going to do really great. Thank you, Tom, for those years of service. I also want to thank the incredible ICE officers, Border Patrol agents, and law enforcement officials who join us here today. If you could stand up, please. These people are also special people. Thank you. And they're good-looking people, aren't they, huh? Good-looking people. Thank you very much for being here, for the bravery. What you do and what you endure is incredible. I also want to stand and have the brave men and women from all over government agencies. We have a lot. Maybe just raise your hand or stand, but we really appreciate the job that you've done, especially during the last year and a half, because I know you've really put in a lot of extra. So please, thank you very much. Thank you. We're gathered today to hear directly from the American victims of illegal immigration. You know, you hear the other side, you never hear this side. You don't know what's going on. These are the American citizens permanently separated from their loved ones. The word permanently being the word that you have to think about, permanently. They're not separated for a day or 2 days. They are permanently separated because they were killed by criminal illegal aliens. These are the families the media ignores. They don't talk about them. Very unfair. We have to look at everybody, but this is a very unfair situation. And I knew that years ago when we would be together out campaigning. And I said, if this ever happens, we're never forgetting you. You know that, Laura, everybody. Incredible people. And they're dedicated. These are the stories that Democrats and people that are weak on immigration, they don't want to discuss, they don't want to hear, they don't want to see, they don't want to talk about. No major network sent cameras to their homes or display the images of their incredible loved ones across the nightly news. They don't do that. They don't talk about the death and destruction caused by people that shouldn't be here, people that will continuously get into trouble and do bad things. For years, their pain was met with silence, their plight was met with indifference, but no more. I told them 3 years ago when we were together, day one, just about day one, I would say, I said, I hear you, I see you, and I will never let you down. And we've been working together, and their loved ones have not died in vain. We all know that. We call these brave Americans the angel families, angel moms, angel pops. These are the angel families. Your loss will not have been in vain. We will secure our borders, and we will make sure that they're properly taken care of. Eventually, the word will get out. We've got to have a safe country. We're going to have a safe country. And your loved ones are going to be playing and will continue to play a big part in it. You know that, right? You know that. So here are just a few statistics on the human toll of illegal immigration. According to a 2011 government report, the arrests attached to the criminal alien population included an estimated 25,000 people for homicide, 42,000 for robbery, nearly 70,000 for sex offenses, and nearly 15,000 for kidnapping. In Texas alone, within the last 7 years, more than 250,000 criminal aliens have been arrested and charged with over 600,000 criminal offenses. You don't hear that. I always hear that, oh, no, the population's safer than the people that live in the country. You've heard that, fellas, right? You've heard that. I hear it so much, and I say, is that possible? The answer is it's not true. You hear it's like they're better people than what we have, than our citizens. It's not true. In 2016, more than 15,000 Americans died from a heroin overdose. More than 90% of the heroin comes from across the southern border. 90%. As a result of sanctuary city policies in fiscal 2017, more than 8,000 criminal aliens. These are really hardcore criminal aliens. Were in police custody and were released because of our weak laws, weakest in the world, weakest in the history of the world. They were released back into our civilian population. And these gentlemen had to do some of the releasing, and I don't think you were too happy when you knew, because you knew. They know better than anybody. You knew what you were releasing. You knew it was trouble, and it often comes back to be trouble. Where is the media outrage over the catch and release policies that allow deadly drugs to pour into our country? Where is the condemnation of the Democrat sanctuary cities that release violent criminals into our communities and then protect them? Like the mayor of San Diego, when she warned everybody that ICE is coming, and they scattered. A big operation, very expensive operation. They were all together. They all scattered. And what are they going to do about looking at her, by the way? I've been asking this question now for 4 weeks. She can do that? And where is the outcry over the savage gang MS-13 and its bloodthirsty creed? Kill, rape, and control. Because the news media has overlooked their stories, I want the American people to hear directly from these families about the pain they have had to endure, losing not only their loved ones, great people, great Americans, people that would have been very successful, people that in some cases could have been here one day, could have been here. I know the way you feel. But could have been right here, standing here. First, I'd like to ask a friend of mine for now a long time, Laura Wilkerson from Pearland, Texas, to come and share her story about her incredible boy, right? Yes. Come on, Laura, just say a few words.
We want to tell you a little bit today about Josh. He was brutally tortured strangled over and over. He was set on fire after death. His last hours was brutal. As everyone standing up here, none of our kids had a minute to say goodbye. We weren't lucky enough to be separated for 5 days or 10 days. We're separated permanently. Anytime we want to see or be close to our kids, we go to the cemetery because that's where they are. We can never speak to them. We can't Skype with them. And I want to thank you so much in this room for what you're doing to understand. You guys know the permanent separation. It's the media that won't share it with other people. It's permanent. We can never have him back on this earth. Thankfully, I'll see him again in heaven. But I want to thank you, Mr. Trump and Vice President Trump, Vice President Pence, for keeping their commitment to us. It's been ongoing. It continues on. And please understand, there are so many more of us than what you see here that had the same story over and over, drunk driving, killed, over and over, and they don't prosecute her. They let go in low bond. They're out in 30 days. It's sad for our country, and it's time to take it back. And I want to thank each and every one of you, law enforcement. You know it. You love it. You want to do your jobs. And thankfully, we have a president who will allow you to do that now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Next, I'd like to ask Juan Pena from Greenfield, California, to speak. Juan, please come up. Thank you. Thank you, Juan.
My name's Juan Pena. First of all, I want to thank the Remembrance Project for bringing my daughter's name out to light and for candidate Trump to let me speak about her. And I've got a lot of people that I need to thank. My daughter was Chrissy Sue Pena. Back in 1990, she was kidnapped, strangled, stabbed, raped, and sodomized, and her new body was found in an artichoke field. I've been fighting for 28 and a half years. He's been fighting. He was loose for 25. The last 3.5 years, he's been fighting extradition. And on May 3rd, God answered my prayers. Mexico finally turned him loose to us, and he is now in the Monterey County Jail, and we can start court procedures for my daughter's death. And I want to thank everybody that was involved in getting him over here. The Sheriff's Department of Monterey County, for the investigator. The sheriff never told her, don't give up on this, just stay on it and stay on it. And she pinky swore that she was going to get him over there, and she did. And I just want to thank the president and everybody. And I just hope everybody can get what I just got. And I'm out here speaking for the thousands of victims that we have here in the United States. And I want to thank you all. Thank you.
So Juan fought for many years, and it's hard to believe, but that's actually a great feeling.
Yes, it is.
That you just, incredible job. Incredible job. Hi, Darren. Also here with us today is Steve Ronnebeck from Mesa, Arizona. Steve, if you could come up and share a few words, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. January 22nd, 2015, Grant was at work on his overnight shift. An illegal alien came in, wanted to buy cigarettes, dumped a jar of change out on the counter. Grant went to count the change and wasn't counting fast enough. So basically, this man pulled a gun. Grant did everything he was supposed to do and gave him the cigarettes. The man went ahead and executed him and shot him point blank in the face. You know, you don't hear these stories, and some of our media won't talk to you about it. But this is permanent separation. For his birthday, I go to his grave. For Christmas, we set up a Christmas tree on Grant's grave. I received something earlier today from Director Homan. It was a challenge coin. And I want to thank you for that. To me, this is a sign of integrity I wish some of our media had the same integrity as our president, our vice president, Director Homan, all of you in law enforcement. I wish some of our media had the same integrity. And I want to thank all of you, especially our law enforcement, for what you do. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, thank you. The members of Voice, Barbara Gonzalez, John Ferry, AVIAC, I want to thank all of them too, because they're helping get the stories out. 63,000 Americans since 9/11 have been killed by illegal aliens. This isn't a problem that's going away. It's getting bigger. Thank you.
$63,000, and that number they say is very low because things aren't reported. 63,000, and you don't hear about that. Also here with us today is Michelle Root from Modale, Iowa. Great place. Michelle, please come up.
Thank you, Mr. President. My daughter, Sarah Root, was killed within 24 hours after graduating with a bachelor's, 4.0 in criminal investigations, out celebrating, stopped at a stoplight and rear-ended by Edwin Mejia going 70+ miles an hour. He was arrested, but then he paid a $5,000 bail, and now he has fled. Our separation, like everybody has said, is permanent. Sarah never gets to go on to be a wife, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt. My son does not have his only sibling any longer. My life has been devastated. So has my daughter's family and friends. I want to thank President Trump and Vice President Pence, Barbara Gonzalez, John Ferry, and Director Homan for all their support. They have never given up on us. AVIAC was a group that we started because we were tired of not having anybody else to go to get information. When Sarah was killed January 31st of 2016, I had nobody, but I was thankful for my politicians in my area. And you know, President Trump was one of the first ones to reach out to my family. And he has been there from the beginning, never left our side. Now we just need to get my daughter's killer found. Again, my separation is permanent. Sarah's never coming home. I never get to take a selfie with her again. I have no more pictures of her. So please, thank you guys for everything. Keep up the great work. Our police officers, our Border Patrol, please continue to fight. Thank you.
Say a few words. Come.
Thank you. My name is Mary Ann Mendoza, and my son, Sergeant Brandon Mendoza, was killed on May 12, 2014, on his way home from work by a 3-time legal limit drunk who was also high on meth. He had drove over 35 miles the wrong way on 4 different freeways in Phoenix before slamming head on into my son's car. As you know, they could fill this stage up every day for the next 5 months of victims of illegal alien crime, and it would just keep going. Unfortunately, we are members of a club of our children or loved ones who've been killed by illegal aliens, but there's hundreds of thousands of victims every year who are affected by illegal alien crime, rape, assault, identity theft. These are things that go unreported, unchecked. You know, if the public would go to illegalaliencrimereport.com and see the magnitude of crimes being committed against your fellow Americans by illegal aliens allowed to stay in this country, you will be sickened, because the mainstream media does not let you know what's really happening. And we are here, the members of AVIAC are here to educate the public as what's happening. And if anybody's been a victim of illegal alien crime, contact us, because we have close connections with Barbara Gonzalez at ICE, John Fury. We have connections at the Department of Homeland Security that we are trying to get